All right, so to get started on the project, I have a new piece of Bristol paper here. I have clean water, clean palette, clean brushes ready to go. And I have my collage from last week. And I've been looking at it and thinking about what I want to do to add the values. I have my value scale and my brushwork. Sometimes I'll make little notes if stuff happens and I like the way it looks. So I have that all next to me. And in looking at this composition, I decided I wanted to make it square. So I'm using a ruler, and yours does not have to be perfect, of course, but I do want you to make outlines for your composition. So you're thinking about how the composition exists on the paper, where the edges of it are. You can make it the entire paper if you're really not feeling the making the lines thing. So I'm gonna make it 8 by 8. So I'm coming in an inch from the edge and I'm going to 9 and coming in an inch from the edge and going to 9. And I make these little carrots. I learned how to do this in wood shop class. Because if you make a line, it can be like off to the side. But if you make these two little lines pointing at the line on the ruler, you know, you can go right through the middle and get something more accurate. So I'm just lining up my ruler with those two lines and those two lines. And then I'll come down and I'm gonna do 1/2 inch from the top. And then so it would be 8.5 down here. And I'm adding 1/2 inch to the top. And 8.5 down here. And having these, you know, these like compositional outlines is really going to help with the space that you're creating. You know, that figure ground relationship, the background, how the background and the shapes relate to each other. And any kind of negative space, so the space in between the shapes. So we want to have the edges of our composition kind of worked out like that. Again, you can use the whole paper if this is just not going to happen for you. Okay, so I'm looking at my composition and we're not painting over this. This is a reference for our drawing, and I'm going to start to roughly sketch in my shapes where I want them to be. And you can make adjustments while you're doing this. So I am very lightly, so this curve, I'm making comparisons, and it doesn't have to be an exact copy. You know, we're making a painting. This is the reference. I definitely want to keep these kind of step things in. And now that I'm drawing this side, I'm really realizing maybe this needs to come out more. So that's why I draw kind of light, so I can keep making adjustments. And then I have this big shape in the middle. So I'm basically copying it and changing it along the way as I see fit, because this is a little bit of a different shape. My original composition wasn't all in square. But I do really like this like sort of negative space shape that's made, and that's kind of the center of my composition. So I want to make sure to get that in. And of course, yours is going to look so different from mine, and that is good. But I'm showing you how we can take the collage that you've created and now make it into an abstract composition. So we're really making these intentional abstracted shapes. I don't want this one looking too Christmas tree. I'm going more Beetlejuice sculptures that the mom made than Christmas tree. More Tim Burton than, though he did do that Nightmare Before Christmas, so it could be a little bit Nightmare Before Christmas maybe. All right, so I'm looking at this. I did want to fill in this negative space between my shapes a little bit more. And when we're talking about the figure ground, remember in representational traditional art, it's called the figure because it was usually the human figure. But in this non-representational, more abstract art, the shapes are our figure, and then the ground is the background. So figures, shapes, background is the ground. That's the figure ground relationship. And they can relate to each other in a lot of different ways through the values, the darks and lights that we're going to be adding, through texture. They can be contrasting each other, or you can do things to unify them, and you can do a balance of both. All right, so I'm pretty happy with this. I know I'm going to change it as I paint too, so I'm not too worried about it. But I like how this is what I drew is filling up the space a little more. Okay, I'm gonna come again in here with my white, and I put a little bit more of the lighter color because the darker colors can, don't need as much. And I'm coming in with my black and squeezing a little bit out of the tube. And now I'm going to be using my value scale as reference. And remember that lighter values pop forward and darker values sink back. Think about how like shadows are dark, so they're going to sink back into the background. So we're going to think about in this composition, what do you want to pop forward and what do you want to go backwards? And you can decide as you go, but we have these values and we're going to start kind of plugging them in. So I know that these shapes are going to be pretty light, and you can always let the paint dry and paint white over them. So I think I'm going to start with the background a little bit, getting the edges in and getting the darker tones in. And what's nice about gouache is you can paint right over it. So can't really make a mistake. So I'm going to do kind of a mid-tone gray, and I'm going to get it right here in the middle. And I have a little water on my paintbrush, and there's a little water from when I cleaned it. And I'm going to get this. And you can see how dark that got. So sometimes when that happens, I'll just take it into another well of my palette. I take my paintbrush and then I'll get more of the lighter color. In this case, it's the white, because if I keep adding more white onto here, well, why don't I just show you what happens? It's gonna get eaten up. But if I take it over here and add white, I can make it lighter faster. Okay, so I have a little bit of a damp brush and a little bit of water on my paint. You can add more if you want. And these paint wells are kind of made to fill in, you can make something really wet called a wash. And I'm just gonna start filling in the background, and this is gonna define the edges of my shape. And you can paint over the line of your composition, which is actually good, because if you were to frame it, you might want that. You wouldn't want the white of the paper showing. And I remember in my I had made a note that I wanted this to be dark on the bottom. So I'm gonna keep it lighter up top here. And you can see how I'm just going right over with the paint to mix it in. You can practice with different brush strokes. And then I know I'm gonna make this darker. So I have a little water on my brush. The paint is a little bit wet and I'm just coming in and starting to fill in. You know, you can use a bigger brush than me. Just get stuff in there, get it down. Don't be afraid. This is very forgiving paint. It's not like watercolor, though I do love watercolor. But you can have more, you can paint over stuff. You can start over as many times as you want. You can start a whole new painting if you want. I'm adding a little bit of water, coming back into this darker color. And I want to make these two areas kind of conjoined so they make sense together. So I'm adding a little bit of this lighter paint in and just going to kind of you can see with this paint, you can see your brush strokes. So that's up to you how much you want to show of that. You know, the more water you add, the more it's going to soften it up so you won't see as much of those brush strokes. So this is really your first painting, you're experimenting, you're figuring out what works for you. I'm adding more water each time. Oh, I picked up some more white and I'm going to take advantage of that because I want this to be a lighter section over here. I want it to go from kind of lighter over here to darker. So I'm just thinking about how my values are going to work in the background. I need more white. Here it is. So you can see how much more white I'm using than the black, and that would be true if I was mixing, you know, a lighter blue or lighter yellow. Just keep mixing it all together. I'm looking at my collage, I'm looking at my drawing, I'm remembering this shape that I liked so much, thinking how I definitely want this area to be lighter so it pops forward a little more. And I'm going to add a little more water because I don't want to see all those brush strokes. Now I'm going to add a little more white to this, kind of mixing these two grays in until I get the one that I want. There we go. That's looking pretty good. So I want you to just go for it. Start getting paint down. Don't be afraid. And then this is dark down here, so I need to find a way to transition into this lighter color. So it's going to kind of fade in. And I think I want this even lighter up here. You can see I'm going right over the edges. I'm gonna add a little bit more water. And a lot of this painting is just about figuring out how the paint works too and how it works for you. You know, you might want to have more of a clean approach than I do. I'm kind of just attacking it and going for it. But you know, I have been painting for a long time, so I can understand that might not be your preferred method. You could really be slowly filling things in. Now I'm not adding water, I'm just going to add a little more white to this gray that I made. And I want to get this start smoothing some of my shapes out. I'm looking at my collage because some of my drawing got lost, and that's okay. That's why we have the collage too. And I'm just actually going over it with my brush because I feel like this is an important focal point of my painting, so I want to start to refine that. All right, now we actually have a lot of values here, you know, on our 7-point value scale. I think I can get even darker on this edge, but I'm gonna wait and start getting some midtones into the shapes themselves. So I'm thinking what might be interesting, and you can do this in yours too, is if where the background is dark, the shapes are lighter. So I'm creating contrast in that figure ground relationship. So there'll be contrast between the figure or the shape, which will be lighter on this side, and the ground or the background, which will be darker. And then on this side, where the ground is a little lighter, I'll make the shapes darker. That could be an interesting way to create a figure ground relationship, or you could go the opposite way and make it really light over here, the shapes light, and that would create some unification between the figure and ground. I'm gonna create some contrast because I think it's easier to see with the video and stuff. So this color that I made too dark, I might come back to and get even darker, a dark, dark gray. And I'm gonna start refining some of these shapes. So I like the texture of this paint that I've created, and see how I'm painting right over the edge of the ground or the background that I made. So that's why I was kind of messy before, because I knew I can paint just right over this, and I got that background in first. So then I can come in and refine. And it's getting dark down here on the bottom, so we can see there's more unification here where the ground and the figure are looking similar, and then this is a more contrast. So I can, you know, keep on adjusting as I go. I can always paint lighter over this when it dries. So if you want to go lighter, you just wait till it dries. And you can use smaller brushes to get more detail too. I'm kind of turning, this is like a flat brush that I can turn on its side to get some detail, but you can use smaller brushes. And then I can come in with, you know, the really opaque black paint right out of the tube and mix it a little in with this because that got watery, and make some really sharp details. And I want you to just take your time with this and enjoy it and make something that you are interested in, that you feel good about. Enjoy the process of it. All right, this paint is getting a little dry over here, or sometimes I call it tacky. Like, I can't describe it. It feels a little dry, but I don't want to add too much water. So I'm adding just a little bit of water and then a little more black paint, and I'm gonna grab some of this gray to keep this dark gray, but I don't want it totally black. And you can always use this value scale if I can kind of check my tones on my paintbrush before I paint on my painting. And again, I'm coming in here and refining my edges. I have to look back at my collage because I really made a mess when I went at it with the background. Okay, this is a circular shape here. And then I want to get these steps in. So I'm thinking about the edges. I'm painting my edges over the background. So I'm getting them where I want them to be. And you can have your edges really crisp and clean, or you can let them sort of fade out. I'm gonna take this brush is sort of dry it off a little more on my towel here. And you can kind of feather out the edges. So this is just a damp brush. The paint is damp. So you can add texture that way. This is creating some more unification, even though the values are different. Having some of this soft edge versus a hard edge here unifies the figure or the shape and the ground, the background. So we're kind of blurring the edge between the figure and ground here. So these are all just little techniques, little ways you can make your painting look the way you want it to look. Ultimately, it's up to you. It's your painting, you're the artist, and you get to choose how you want it to look. I would say try like a variety of techniques. Now, if you felt like you're good and you don't want to watch this video anymore, you can stop and get started on your painting. I'm gonna keep going for those of you who feel like you need more of a demonstration, or if it's your first time painting, you know, you can just watch. I might not talk as much and get into the zone here, but if I do something different, I will explain. All right, I'm gonna come back to, I'm gonna call this now my mixing brush. I'm gonna get some of this, because I actually like the way that looks. So when something like this happens, and now I'm dabbing it. Kind of go for, I don't want to overdo it because I want it to be a bit of a moment here. But I think some of these edges need to be softened. I don't want them all to be so crisp. Maybe the steps will be a little more crisp. Okay, I'm gonna clean that off because I like this as my mixing brush, so I want to keep it clean and dry it off a little bit. That's why I have that jar there to keep stuff clean. I'm cleaning this. And now I'm gonna add some lighter tones over here. So I did squeeze out a little more of that white paint. And I'm gonna add it to this gray that I made. It's getting a little dry, so I'm putting a little more water in there. And because of the water, see how there's that transparency? So we can build up layers of opacity here to cover the background, because see, that's not covering the background the same way it did with the dark paint covering the light background. It doesn't work exactly the same. So we're gonna need some more white paint for that. I kind of like slide it off the side so I keep my tube clean. Okay. I'm gonna get a lot of paint in here. So it is a little bit damp, but I'm not getting my brush wet again. And then if you want to clean up that edge, you can see how you can get it more if you wanted a sharp edge here. I think that looks way better. So that's the opacity working for you versus the transparency. I want this to be a little more curved. And you can always come in again and redo the background color too to redefine your shapes. I think I remember when I was making this, we wanted this to be, or I wanted this to be a little bit of a wave shape. So I'm gonna keep kind of messing with that. Get these other shapes in. And now this is very close to the color of the paper. So I think I need to go a little darker just for it to show up. Some people will paint on like they call it a toned ground. So just like a color in the background, a mid-tone gray, so that you can paint those whites. And that's kind of exciting too. I like painting on colored canvases or colored paper. All right, you can see I'm gonna need to add a little more white still, so end up using a lot of the white if you're doing something similar to me. But I'm just gonna I wanna get paint everywhere on my paper now so I can really start thinking about what these shapes are doing. And it's gonna get a little darker as I get closer to this lighter ground. So this was the background, this shape. So I'm thinking, and then this is a shape, but these are really disconnected right now. So I need this shape to kind of blend a little better over here. So I need to create a better mid-tone color. So I'm kind of dipping into all these to use up what I have to see if I can. And some of it I'm thinking might get close to the background color, but I think I'm okay with that. I'll add some details in here. Maybe I'll outline some things to differentiate the shape and the ground, or maybe it will just blend into the ground and that's fine too. Need more white again. Okay. Before I add more white to this, I want to get this, because this is going to be a little darker. All right, I need to mix up some more paint. So I'm going to clean my brush. And I'm going to take the white, move some over here, just take a little bit of black, a little more. And I'm going to start to fill in some edges where I need the white to show up a little better. And remember, you can use open shapes too, so you can create some lines and some shading in here, like I did with remember these lines that we created? So you can go for it with that too. And it can turn into something completely different from your, from what your collage was. You know, I encourage you to look at Miro work and see how he worked from collage to create those abstract paintings that you would never know they came from industrial images he cut out of magazines and stuff, and he really created something new. Okay, I'm creating a very dark black here because I want to get some contrast in. And I think where my trouble areas are is getting the blending between the dark part of the shape to the light part of the shape and making that work with the background. So I'm going to work on that, connecting the parts of the shape. I'm going to just soften up this edges a little bit. Okay, I want to get kind of like a mid-tone gray that's in between. So I'm getting a little bit of water and I'm going to grab some white. Okay, and now I'm gonna take my blendy brush that it just has a tiny bit of water on it and no paint, and kind of blend stuff in before my edges dry, because I'm not so sure. So when I'm not sure about something, I'm gonna wipe this off, dry it a little bit. When I'm not sure about something, I blend a lot. And then I can always come back and harden those edges, but I just wanna see how things are looking. All right. So to me, this part of the painting feels more finished, where this part is feeling, or more resolved. I don't know if anything's ever finished. This part's not feeling great to me. So I need to find a way to get this looking the way I want. So I'm gonna take this gray tone, but maybe make it a little darker and build up some different values that are gonna work together to get to this black. So I'm adding just a little more black, because I like the very sharpness on the edges here, so I want that to stay pure black. I'm gonna add more pure black back in. And sometimes you have to wait till stuff dries to see what it's actually gonna look like. And let it kind of blend in with the rest of this shape. I'm gonna wash my brush off. I also think I need to start reinforcing this background. And I like what happened here with the wet paper. There's a line here that I want to get rid of. So I'm gonna take a pretty wet brush. I'm not gonna wipe it off on my towel. I'm just gonna do this. I'm gonna see if I can get that looking a little better. Yeah, because now some of the paper is showing through. You can go too far on this and rip the paper, and that's awesome. If you're with your paper, that means you're really working. And I rip my paper all the time. And I'm also gonna come in here with a wet brush, because I don't like the way those brush strokes look. And I'm gonna blend this edge so it's a contrast with the sharp edge here that I like, because this is kind of our focal point. So I'm gonna kind of mush the other part that's not the focal point into the background. And I'm gonna add a little bit more color here. And then it gets really dark. I wanted this area to be very dark. So I'm making the paper a little bit wet. And then I'm coming in with my completely dark black pigment out of the tube, and I'm adding it here. And I'm getting my brush a little more wet, and I'm coming in and blending it through. And I can reinforce some of these shapes. Like I think I wanted more of a curve here. So just the way I was making the shapes with the, the edges with the shape, now I'm using the background to paint over the edges a little bit to make sure I'm getting the edges that I want. And I'm gonna take time to blend this. And sometimes I like when stuff like that happens with the brush strokes, so I'll keep going with it. And I did want to make this more of a I don't know, more curved, more of a wave looking kind of thing. All right, I'm washing my brush off, and I'm gonna blend this in because I really wanted this to kind of fade into the lighter color here, and I wanted this edge to kind of blend before it gets sharp. right, letting this dry before I see what it needs, but I'm coming in with just kind of a wet brush and getting things blended, looking the way I want. Now this area is not making me so happy, so I need to get back into my midtones here. So I'm taking white and adding it to this gray I have in the center. And I'm gonna just see how you can paint right over that. And then I'm gonna clean this off, because remember, it's hard. If I just kept adding white to that, it wouldn't be so great, but I'm gonna come in and take the pure white, and now that's really gonna start showing up, and blend it in here. And I can paint the pure white over the black to reinforce this shape to get it the way I want it to be. And I kind of actually am liking the way that looks. Before it was a little too blended, but now it's looking a little better. My brush was getting dry, so I'm just dipping it a little bit and tapping it and coming back into this gray, getting this mid-tone color down that I do actually really like. So I'm gonna get it blended more. And then I'm coming in with the white. I didn't clean my brush that time. We'll see what happens. I needed a little more water on my brush for that. And you can make different kind of paint strokes. I don't know why that looks like Sonic the Hedgehog to me, because my nephews are obsessed. And I can get these brush strokes looking the way I want it, so it looks intentional. So I'm getting some texture in here, but I'm doing it the way I want it to look. I like what was happening there, so I'm trying different things. Now I feel like I still need to resolve this area. So I'm adding more black to this gray. And I'm adding more water so I can blend. I'm gonna clean my brush because that got too dark. And I'm gonna take some white and see what I can do here to make it. Let's see, you know what, I think why this isn't working, because I had the two different shapes more distinct, and I think that's why that's not working here. So I do think I need to add in sort of lines to make this work better. It's kind of a weird area that was just giving me, just was not looking right to me. Oh, I see. It touches here. There we go. I feel like that's looking better already for me, that distinction. Kind of want to blend this out so the background and the figure get a little bit hard to tell the difference in right here, because it is, maybe it was giving me the feeling of water or waves. So I kind of want to make it a little more interesting. All right, So you're gonna keep going. And I'm trying to show how I make decisions. You know, this is an abstract painting, so it's about, you can even take a step back. I think letting it dry and coming back to it is always a good thing. Make sure you're getting, you know, most of the values on your value scale in here. I think I actually am missing some lighter values, so I'm gonna come in and, well, I still have white on my palette, get some whites in there. I'm gonna use this brush because it's smaller. I'm gonna get a little bit of water and the pure white from the tube, and I want to get some white, maybe some white lines in here and some brushy texture happening. And I can add a little more water and blend it in a little bit. And see how now this white is looking great painted over that dark background. So that's why you can kind of build up your backgrounds first. There's really no right or wrong with this. You know, I just noticed that I kind of lost my light values. I don't really have a lot of the pure white, so I wanted to start adding it back in. And I just like in gouache how these lighter values can make, like, if you do kind of dry brushing and then just a little bit of water, they can look cool over the darker values. You can create some depth and interest. Here's my Sonic the Hedgehog area for my nephews. So I'm bringing back the lights after they get lost. And that often happens in all kinds of paintings. Like, you start building up your values, you start building up your darks and lights, and the light can get lost really quickly. So that's something you kind of do at the end, is you can bring back like the highlights and stuff. So think about where you want them to be. Think about where your darkest darks are, where your lightest lights are. You can even add texture with like little dots. And it's gonna show through what's in the background because this stuff kind of dried. And just experiment. You know, it's not supposed to look like anything. It's supposed to look like whatever you want it to look like. So see what works for you. And remember, this was a focal point that I was talking about, but now this area with all this texture has kind of taken over. So I'm just cleaning my brush and wiping it off. And I'm gonna come in with some more of that white, and I'm kind of using the edge of my palette to get it sparingly. And I wanna just like, it's called like scrubbing, just scrub some white on here to get some texture. To bring more attention back to this space. You know, and if you don't like something, you can just wait till it dries and go over it. So there's no harm. All right, I'll do a little bit of splatter because I know everybody loves that, and then I'll be done. So I'm getting water. I'm getting kind of a liquidy paint. And to splatter, you can use an old toothbrush. Or a new toothbrush, not a toothbrush you use on your teeth, but you can use your paintbrush too. So I have a liquidy paint and I'm holding my finger steady and I'm dropping the brush. It's just so fun. It like never gets old, no matter how much I do it. You don't have to splatter on yours, but I just did that and realized maybe I'll put some splatter. And then, you know, you can wipe it up in areas like, I don't want it to be here. I just wanted it to be in the center. So you can just get rid of it. In other places, you can use a paper towel to clean it up, or you can just kind of blend it in. I do not want it to be on here either. So I could take some black paint or paper towel. Let it go. And I want to make these steps, but I'm gonna be done because I think this is plenty good enough. And remember, you'll use this next week and you're going to make another new painting, but this is going to be a reference. So like we used the collage as a reference, now we have this painting as a reference for our next painting. So we're building up these abstract compositions to get to something that feels right and to practice these techniques. You know, we're practicing value, we're practicing the figure-ground relationship, how these objects work with the background. And then your cleanup is the same, and have fun with it. If you watch this whole way, you're awesome.